Hello, this is Wes. Welcome to my new YouTube channel. I'm a booktuber, apparently, and a writer. This channel is called Books Under Your Bed, and the first book that I'll be reviewing and analyzing, I guess, a little, is The Night by Gene Wolfe. I'm also going to speak a little bit about its sequel, because it's a duology. But first I would like to talk about the author, Gene Wolfe. He's a pivotal, famous science fantasy author, generally speaking. He's released lots of books, lots of short story collections, but his most famous work is The Book of the New Sun, which is made up of 4 books. I have the first 2 collected in this. The Shadow of the Torturer is the first of the 4 books. But really, those 4 books make up a complete story that has a big reveal near the end that recontextualizes some of the things that you experienced in those 4 books. But while you're reading them for the first time, they're definitely meant to be a little confusing. You're like trying to piece things together, but things aren't really fitting together, and those answers only come at the end. So if it's not really worth reading one of the books, you kind of have to read all 4 to get a worthwhile story. It's also famous for being worth rereading, because once you have everything kind of pieced together, you see everything in a different light. Anyways, the author, after that, wrote the books of the Long Sun, and then also wrote the books of the Short Sun. So there's more in that universe than just those 4 books. And by the time he finished all of those books, he was a little tired about writing about the same subject, so he created this new series of 2 books called The Wizard Knight, with the first book called The Night. And that's the book I'm going to talk about today. Why I had all that sort of build up to talking about this one book is that Gene Wolfe often has literary goals that are in conflict with how you would normally write a novel. It violates a lot of the advice that would be given to a person to write a good story. In the first book, it's told from the perspective of a kid who's been transported to this fantasy land, and his perspective is limited, and he's telling you the story, but he'll often skip scenes and mention those scenes later as if he or told you those scenes. It also has moments where a lot of things will happen, and then he'll meet another character, and then he'll describe everything you just read. It'll be very episodic, and events will feel random. So all of these elements are working together, and it seems like, does Gene Wolfe know how to write? Like, why is he doing these strange quirks that, like, he has to know that readers won't really like this. There's another core element of the book at the same time is themes about knights and their behavior. A big question of the first book is, what does it mean to be a knight if Christianity is removed from the equation? Because Christianity was a key component of the morality of knight behavior and chivalry, protecting your king and queen and obeying orders. And if you remove the motive of pleasing God, what value does acting like a knight bring to the table, so to speak? So we have these 2 elements: questionable writing choices, themes about a knight. Me as a reader, I started to piece together that he uses a lot of elements of pre-Tolkien fantasy. Those elements aren't always enmesh with modern sensibilities about storytelling. So by bringing those in, he situates the story in a historical context that's connected to classic fantasy. Norse mythology, fairyland, King Arthur, etc., to bring people back to those primal ideas of the quest cycle. In the first book, that's really most of what it's about, is like reestablishing and giving an example of a quest cycle, showing a hero and his behavior, and having a satisfying full epic. But obviously, by the time you've finished the book and you've experienced that classic quest cycle, it begs the question of like, what will he do in The Wizard, now that he's done all of these old classic motifs? And that's where I think the story gets transcended into something that's interesting and amazing. It gets to then answer questions about what is the use of the quest cycle in Legends? How does a hero affect his society? So the sequel is less about the main character and more about the ripples in around him from his behavior. So I definitely think it's worth reading. I was very emotionally affected by the ending of the second book. It's great that it's only 2 books, one establishing the classic legendary narrative, the other showing the effects and what that narrative really means. So if you get a chance to read it, I'd love other people to analyze it, look deeper into it, like I did, because it's not just a normal fantasy novel where it's just a adventure that you get swept up in and it's over. It's asking deeper questions, philosophical questions about the nature of story, the nature of nobility and honor. Why I found it so emotionally moving is that at this time in history, we really need to think about what it means to be heroic and how that affects and changes the society around us. Um, Thanks for listening to this deconstruction and analysis of The Wizard Knight. I think part of the goals of these reviews will be less to say is a book good or bad, but meet the book at what it's trying to do. On conventional analysis, there's all sorts of things where The Wizard Knight fails. Lots of the characters aren't that three-dimensional. Some of its concepts are thinly drawn, but they're all in service of an idea that it's trying to convey. And the idea of a novel can often be much more important than those details, because sometimes you have to violate the rules of what is good and what is bad to create something that is a piece of art. See you next time.